back to my channel, Plow and Pantry people. Today I am starting a series of canning videos. I'm canning every Saturday in January as part of a canning collaboration with some friends. We call this canuary. I think that term was invented by Lisa Sutton, I'm not sure. She is doing a different canuary collaboration. So if you were trying to follow hers, I will link her channel below. I will also link all the channels that are involved in this collaboration. And there's probably, if you just put in the search bar canuary, you'd probably come up with a lot of other people doing canning videos for January as well. I just wanted to let you know that though. We're canning dry beans today using the no soak or dry canning method. It's not dry canning necessarily because we do use water, but we're not soaking the beans ahead of time. And I want to put out there right away that this is not an approved canning method. This is something we call rebel canning. There are very, very few things that I rebel can. Beans is one of them. I prefer them this way. I sometimes do a set of pickles, rebel canned pepperoncinis, but for the most part, I stick to approved methods of canning. If you are interested in the approved method of canning, I will link the National Center for Home Food Preservation below in the description box, where you can find how to do it with like the soaking and all the normal stuff. But this is my favorite method. I think whether you're using their methods or mine, you should always do your own research with canning. Always do your own research with canning, okay? But the reason I can these rebel style is because I like the texture, mostly is the reason. These cook while they are being canned, while they're being processed. And to me, that texture at the end of the jar is the perfect canned bean texture. And when I have done like the soaked method, the normal approved method for canning beans in the past, not only do I feel like when it comes out of the jar, it's a little bit on the soft side for me, but then when I use it, because I'm usually, if I'm using a can of beans or a jar of beans, I'm usually adding it to something like a chili or a soup or a casserole where it's getting cooked again, which makes it even softer. And to me, it's just too mushy. So I don't like the texture. There are a lot of people who do though, so I would encourage you to experiment when you can. This is just my preferred method. Again, do your own research. Also, I end up doing a lot of canning in January and February of beans specifically, because that's when I'm going through the pantry, reorganizing, cleaning out, doing a pantry challenge right now. I will link that playlist if you're interested in the pantry challenge I'm in. But it makes sense when I'm doing that, as I pull forward my beans that are close to expiring, to can those up to extend their life, because beans are not like rice and some other things where you can just leave them on the shelf. Just because they're shelf stable doesn't mean they last forever. They actually will get hard and not cook. So when I take something that is going to expire in like a month and put it in a jar and can it, then it will last for another couple years. So I prefer to kind of sort of clean out my pantry that way with the beans, where I will take the ones, these were the end of 2023, but I think they'll be fine. These expire in 2 months. I'm not sure I can fit all these in my canner today, but it makes sense to pull out the ones that are oldest, get them in jars so they last me longer, and then that makes room for future sales for dry beans that I get. Plus, when I cook with beans, I normally, not every recipe, but normally, I use a canned bean anyways. So it's kind of a process or a system of a rotation to use my oldest beans, get them canned in the beginning of the year, use them throughout the year, backfill those dry beans with new sales and new beans, and get the process going that way. It also makes financial sense to buy dry beans, because a friend of mine I was explaining this to, she was like, well, why not just buy the canned beans? I do when they're on sale sometimes, but financially, you know, one of these, this size, like a pound of dry beans, costs barely more than a can of beans in the store. But this, when you cook it up, makes several jars, which are each jar is equal to a can. So financially, it's cheaper to buy the dry beans and then can them yourself. Plus, I just like to do that. There's less in them. I can control what's in them, control the texture, all that stuff. All right, so I wanted to mention the canner I'm using today because there are different ways to do pressure canning. All right, today I'm using my All-American pressure canner. Let me turn this around a little bit here. This is, I think, the model 921. It fits 19 pints, which is what I am doing today. When you are pressure canning, you can stack the jars, unlike water bath canning. This is large. I got the biggest one I could fit under the hood of my stove when I bought it. I actually don't use this canner that much anymore. I do love it. It's a great canner, but it's big and it's also heavy. And so I have found myself using my digital pressure canner more and more. But today, because I'm canning so many beans, I wanted my biggest canner so I could stack those and get a lot of jars in there and get a whole bunch done at once. Next week, if you're interested in seeing a digital canning video, I will be using that for my next week's video next Saturday. But this is the All-American. There is also a very popular one on the market called a Presto canner. We're talking just pressure canners here, not water bath. It is another great canner. A lot of people love it. I think they each have different things that are great about them. One of the things about the Presto canner is it's a lot lighter, which some people say that's less quality, but I actually, as I age, I kind of disagree because this is heavy. And when you fill it with water and jars, it's even heavier. So I might actually get myself a Presto in the future. But right now, I love this. And they are both fairly easy to use once you learn. You do 1 or 2 canner loads and then you've learned how. They're pretty easy. So when you are using at least this one, you need 2 to 3 inches of water in the bottom. I have put in, I'm going for room temperature today. So I've put in some water and letting it sit. I mark the 3-inch mark inside with a Sharpie. And I do that so that I know where to fill it. That does occasionally come off and I have to stick the ruler in there and redo it, but that way I don't have to sit there with a ruler each time and figure it out. Because I am doing so much today, I can do between 2 and 3 inches of water. Because I am canning so much today, I put it closer to the 3-inch mark. And it's a long canning process time with beans. So I wanted to make sure that I had enough water to create the pressure and the steam for it. So you can see where I have marked. There's my line and there is the water right just below it. I'm not sure if that same 2 to 3 inches is for every canner. I think it is, but again, your 2 best resources are the National Center for Home Food Preservation and your canner's manual. I actually pull my manual out almost every time I use this just to remind myself of a few things. So look at your manual to tell you what to do. Okay, let's go a washer. I'm gonna go ahead and dump this thing in here and hopefully I can get all of these into my canner. I might have to do 2 sessions to get both these and the pinto beans done. And that's fine. That just means I have a lot of beans on the shelf. As I go through, I'm looking for obvious beans that are not great anymore. I'll pull out some more later too. But I take out broken ones as well. For cooking, if I was just cooking these straight from dry and then eating them, I wouldn't care if they're broken, but for canning, I'm kind of particular. I will throw these away. Go through them all. That's a bit hot. Cracked ones like that. I ended up putting these in a bowl with water to further rinse them as I picked through them and then re-drained them in the colander. Y'all, this is why you wash and rinse your beans. Look at that water. It's disgusting. Okay, let's get this out of the way and pull these beans up here. So I have clean jars ready. I have clean rings and I have clean lids. My lids are soaking in some warm water here. The box nowadays says you don't have to do that anymore, but I find that I get better seal results if they've been just kind of soaked in some warm water. It doesn't have to be hot, but just warm. I also have a little dish of vinegar because I like to use vinegar to wipe my rims. Okay, and I'm gonna use a 1/2 cup measure and a funnel. So I have regular mouth jars and wide mouth jars here just because that's what I had upstairs. It doesn't matter which one you use. For beans, I don't care. For like pickles, I like wide mouth. I'm kind of particular on what I can, what in. For this, I don't care. But I have my 19 jars here to fill my canner. And for a pint, if you're using the no soak method for a pint, you want to do a 1/2 cup per jar. I do a scant 1/2 cup because I like the how it fills the jar better. And as long as you still have the 1-inch headspace, it's fine. You don't have to use more beans. It's the headspace that matters most. If you were to do quart jars, you would want to have a cup instead of a 1/2 cup, which makes sense. I'm gonna start by filling all my jars. Okay, I got my jars filled with the beans here. I'm about to add the water. I had to pick through a lot of the white, so I was able to make room for some of the pinto beans. I am using just room temperature tap water, just slightly warmer than cold. I've got my lid grabber and my debubbler here. I need a paper towel for this. Okay, so the beans have a 1-inch headspace. Pretty sure that's the same no matter if you're doing the pints or the quarts, but check your manual. But I know that this is a 1-inch headspace for my pints, which is right at the bottom of the rings. But you can, if you're not sure, you can always double check with your debubbler. This side of it, the step side, is a measurer. There's like a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 1 inch, and you can see if you have done it correctly. Okay, so 2 things happen here at this spot. You might have a few floating beans, like right here I have 2. I take those out. Those are not welcome in my jars. Even though there's not really a lot of bubbles, you still kind of want to stir, let those ones loose, and just in case there are any bubbles, double check your headspace. There we are. Perfect. And fill all your jars this way. Okay, so now that I have these in jars and the water up, you can add, before you add the water if you want, you can add salt. I don't add salt to mine. I add all my salt while I'm cooking, but I did want to do an experiment this time. I'm going to add, I have an open package of taco seasoning. I wanted to try a jar and see if I like that. It does not, this is just from the store. I normally make my own taco seasoning, but these are really cheap. I'm just gonna put the 1/2 teaspoon in a jar, just like I would with salt. And I'm only doing 1 because I just wanna know, I don't wanna do a whole bunch and not like them. I just wanna know if I'll like it. Okay, so I believe I have my wide mouth lids, forgot to wipe them. So wiping the rims now, I like to use vinegar. I just feel like vinegar cuts through any finger oils that might be on there, any fats, anything that might prevent the lid from sticking. And ever so often you turn your cloth, get it fresh. When I can meat, I turn my cloth every jar. For this, and since these were clean, like fresh clean, almost warm. I kind of had to wait for them to cool down coming out of the dishwasher. I will add my extra vinegar to my canner because I have really hard water, and my jars will always come out with like a white film that I actually have to like scrub to get off. There's nothing wrong with it, that doesn't mess with the food at all, but I just don't like it. And so I just add whatever's left after I wipe the rims. I just dump right in my water into my canner. Okay. So now I'm getting these lids on. When I'm putting them in, I don't know if this is a ridiculous tip. When I am putting my lids in the bowl of warm water to soak, in order to keep them from sticking together, I layer them like upside down, right side up, upside down. Does that make sense? So that they don't like lock together like this. That's what I do. Just to make it easier to pick them up and to make sure that they're all getting the warm water on the seal. Again, I'm not using super hot water on the seal, just warm, fairly warm, but warm. Don't fingertip tight how you want the lids. You don't, it's always harder on camera, y'all. So when you're turning your lids fingertip tight, which is what you want, what that means is that you hold your wrist in place and turn your fingers. You may see me in videos sometimes using my whole hand, but I've been canning a really long time and I know how tight to make it. And so sometimes I do that because my hand or wrist hurts, depending on what else I've been doing, but I'm not cranking it down. You want it tight enough to hold on the lid, but you want it loose enough that the air bubbles can escape out of the jar, and it creates that vacuum seal. So fingertip tight is how you get that. Okay, time to get all these in the canner. Okay, I don't know if I mentioned that I am using, gotta put one of these down so the jars aren't sitting on the bottom of the canner. I am using room temperature water in my jars. And I'm doing that, and my jars themselves are room temperature. I'm doing that because it helps prevent siphoning. Siphoning is when, as you process the jars, sometimes some of the liquid inside will escape. A little bit of siphoning is normal in pressure canning, but you don't want like half of your jar empty. So one way to help prevent siphoning is to make sure that everything is the same temperature. If I was using like a hot packed food, like I cooked a beef stew and I was putting it in the jars, I would use hot jars and hot water to make sure that it's all the same. But I'm using room temperature water, room temperature jars, room temperature beans. So whatever it is, whatever temperature you're doing, do it all the same. Here is the hardest part of the All-American canner, is getting the lid perfect, because that is what will make it seal and build up to pressure. I have in my kitchen a little travel size thing of Vaseline that I use on the inside of this rim around the canner. You can use olive oil. I have had better luck with the Vaseline. Sometimes the olive oil has worked for me and sometimes it hasn't, but every time I've used the Vaseline, it's worked for me. Okay. So I'm gonna get just a thin coat all the way around right there. And then I am getting my lid on. There is an arrow, which is why I turned this, but apparently I turned it too far. Should have turned it the other way. Okay, there's an arrow on your lid and like a divot over in the, okay, my arrow on the canner is slightly to the right. To the right, and I'm going to turn it to where it is lined up with that divot. And then at this point, I want to make sure that all of these little hooks that are under every other nut part, that they are going underneath. This little hook right here goes underneath that, okay? So that helps make sure that things are lined up right. The other thing to make it perfect is you've got to keep an eye on the distance in here. It needs to be even all the way around. And one of the ways we do that is to do two opposite screw bolty things, wing opposite ends, two at a time. Try to make sure you are getting it. And what I do is I'm going to do this process twice. I'm going to do it really lightly first. So I just have these kind of in place. Go across, do the same thing on this side. Okay, and you always do it in pairs and always do the opposite sides. It's looser. Okay. And then when they're just lightly on there, that's when I'll go check this. Make sure that it is the same all the way around. It can be a little harder to do in the back. My front is a little bit higher up, so I'm going to adjust that. But then that means that I also have to check the rest of the thing to make sure I didn't get it off. Okay. At this point, we are ready to finish tightening them down. A little bit tighter. You don't want them crazy tight. Like, you want to get them tight, but you don't want to like use a wrench or something super, super insane. And then check that distance again. Okay. This is when we can turn on our canner finally. Okay. I'm going to turn this onto high heat and get it going. And I am looking for, the pressure is going to come up, and I am looking for steam to start coming out of this little nubbin thing sticking up over here.
Okay, I'm not sure how well you can see this because the angle makes it hard to see, but there is steam coming through that venting pipe, and you want to see that in a steady stream for 10 minutes. I actually, when I loaded the canner, I didn't start it right away. I had to go get my girls from school. And you don't want to start this when you're going to have to leave it, because this becomes a long process. It takes a while to get up to heat, and then it has to vent. And at this point, once you see it coming through, which you can't really see here, but it really is coming straight through, all like a constant stream, you set a timer for 10 minutes. And once that 10 minutes is over, that is when you put on the weight. And after 10 minutes, you see me here putting my weight on, straight on that pipe at the 15 pound, because that is what's appropriate for my elevation. Okay, as this comes up to pressure, this will jiggle. And that's when you start the timer. The first jiggle is when you start your processing time. For me, for pints, it is 75 minutes. And I'm going to turn down my stove so that this only jiggles like 1 to 4 times per minute.
Okay, it's early the next morning, you guys. So I waited until after my girls came home from school to start this because there were things to do. And once you get the oven on, the stove on, there's quite a bit of time involved. It has to come up to steam, which takes a while. The steam goes for 10 minutes. You put on the jiggler, the weighted gauge, and then that brings the whole canner up to pressure, which you can watch on your dial if you want. And that takes a while. Coffee, sorry. That takes a while to do. And then once it's up there, that's when you start the timer. And this is 75 minutes. If I was doing quarts, it would have been 90 minutes. So I ended up finishing this late. I just turned it off after the 75 minutes, and you have to let it come down to pressure. You can't just take the lid off. Don't do that. You have to let the pressure come to 0. I actually like to let it go a little bit. That takes like an hour or so. I like to let it go a couple of hours. Last night though, I was so tired, I just turned off the stove and let it cool overnight. I don't recommend doing that. And here's why. If you let it cool all the way, it can create a suction and make the lid hard to get off. I have done that before. There is a way to get it off. It involves kind of prying it with a screwdriver. The directions for that are in the canning manual. But today, I think we're gonna be good today because it's still actually a little bit warm to the touch. I'm almost hugging it right now. It's cold outside and it feels good. So what I would do normally, let it come down to 0. I let it go a little bit past that. And then normally you'd want to take this off with mitts because it stays hot for quite a while. And then just like we tightened it up on opposite ends, I'm gonna loosen this on opposite ends and we'll see if our lid is stuck here or if we did okay. Okay, turn it back. Ah, it came off. Lucky me. Okay, so then let's see what we have here. Oh, nice. We've got some beans. Some of the pinto beans. Let's get some white beans here. Some white beans. So this is why I like to do a scant half cup when I fill them, to give them a little space, because otherwise, see how much they puff up? They can actually like clog in there and then you have to like scoop them out of the jar. All right, let me get these unloaded. We're almost done. I should also mention that I would normally use my jar lifter to take these out because normally they would be too hot to the touch, but since it's sat overnight, we're good here. And there we have 19 pints of beans.